When you sit on the bench long enough, you learn that the law doesn't just reveal people's actions, it reveals their upbringing. Some arrive humbled, nervous, hands trembling as they speak. Others walk in like they own the place, as if the courtroom were just another office in their empire. And then there are the rare ones, the ones who don't yet realize that the law doesn't care who their parents are. That morning she was one of them. Olivia Grant, 28 years old. Public liaison for the city council, daughter of the sitting mayor. The kind of name that, in this city, opens doors before you even knock. I remember the sound of her heels before I saw her. Sharp, deliberate. Not the nervous click of someone walking into judgment, but the steady rhythm of someone walking onto a stage. She thought she'd already won. The courtroom was full. The usual weekday crowd. Unpaid parking tickets, expired meters, a few traffic citations. Routine business. But when she walked through those doors, everything in the room shifted just a little. The clerks looked up. Even the officers by the wall straightened. She moved like someone accustomed to attention, her phone glowing in her hand like a scepter. She said not so much interviewing who she was at the podium announce her case. She was already at the podium. Olivia Grant, she said, not so much introduce her. Then came that smile, polite, rehearsed, but distant. How can we move this along? I'm late for a city meeting. There was a murmur through the courtroom, not loud but audible enough. People recognize entitlement when they see it. I set down my pen and looked up. Miss Grant, we do have a process, I said evenly. She tilted her head, voice smooth and efficient. Of course, Judge. I'm only suggesting we be efficient. My office will handle whatever fine you need. There was arrogance but assumption. The unspoken belief that her family's reach extended even here, past the wooden rail, up to the bench itself. Your office doesn't owe me anything, I said quietly. You owe the city an explanation. She sighed, a faint hint of irritation flickering across her face. It's a parking citation. I waited in a school zone for a call that couldn't wait. Nobody was harmed. I opened the file. The cameras show your vehicle idling for 12 minutes where stopping is prohibited at dismissal time. Her tone sharpened slightly. The 12 minutes isn't a crime, Your Honor. It's a schedule. The law disagrees, I replied. She looked past me then, toward the back of the room, as if the real authority might arrive at any moment. Well, my father will want to know why we're making a scene out of nothing. That's when I leaned forward. Erie stores are open. Miss Grant, once they close, the bench governs by the same rules for everyone. Her smile thinned, the first crack in her carefully polished demeanor. A judge, with respect, the city has priorities. I help manage them. In this court, I said, has one. Respect? Let's start there. She lowered her eyes, but not out of shame, out of impatience. Her fingers danced across her phone screen. Well, put it away, I said. That's the mayor, she replied. He'll want to speak with you. They can wait, I answered. The statute can't. A ripple of laughter broke across the pews, followed by silence. You could feel the tension rise, the electricity of watching privilege finally meet resistance. I tried another page in her record. You've had prior warnings. Rolling through a red during a ribbon cutting, occupying a reserved lane during a festival, each resolved within hours. I looked up. Do you believe your last name amends the ordinance? She finally met my eyes. I believe the city knows who works for it. I nodded slowly. But the city also knows who it works for. Parents walking children across that curb don't pause for your calls. For the first time, there was a flicker of something in her expression. Annoyance, maybe, or the faint sting of realization. She straightened her shoulders, defensive. Are you trying to make an example of me? I'm trying to find out, I said, whether you came here as a citizen or as an heir to someone else's influence. The courtroom was utterly still. Even the hum of the fluorescent lights seemed to fade. Then I closed the folder and set it aside. We'll take this at the end of the docket. Remain in the courtroom. She opened her mouth to protest, then stopped herself. The phone screen went dark in her hand. As she stepped back toward the benches, I addressed the room. But my words were meant for her. Titles belong outside. Inside only conduct matters. A few people nodded quietly. Papers shuffled. The next case was called. Life in the courtroom went on. Traffic fines, citations, routine matters, but the air near the front stayed charged. heavy with something unsaid. And as I glanced up between hearings, I noticed her sitting there, still poised, still composed, but no longer amused. The arrogance had cooled into something else. Maybe discomfort. Maybe curiosity. Because for the first time, Miss Olivia Grant, the daughter of the most powerful man in the city, had been told that her father's influence stopped at the edge of my bench. And in that silence, as the courtroom moved on around her, I wondered if she'd learned the first quiet lesson of justice, that humility doesn't humiliate. It equalizes. That was the moment the real hearing began. Not the one recorded on paper, but the one that happens inside a person when they're finally forced to meet themselves without protection. I didn't know yet where the case would lead or how far her father's shadow would stretch. But one thing was certain. Olivia Grant had walked into this courtroom expecting a transaction. What she was going to get instead was a transformation. The next morning, the courtroom felt different. The kind of difference you don't hear but sense, like the air before a storm. The clerks moved with quieter precision. The officers exchanged cautious looks, and even my gavel felt heavier than usual in my hand. Because everyone knew who was on the docket again that day. Miss Olivia Grant, the mayor's daughter. And though the courtroom looked the same worn benches, the same hum of the ceiling fan, the same tired faces waiting for justice, the weight of her name hovered over us all. She walked in 10 minutes late. No apology, no hesitation, just that same calm, calculated confidence. This time, however, the smile was missing. She looked composed, but colder, more guarded, like someone preparing for battle. Miss Grant, I began as she took her place at the podium. I trust you've had time to reflect on yesterday's discussion. Her response came smoothly practiced. Yes, Your Honor, and I've spoken with my father. He believes this matter can be resolved quickly. Of course he did. Power always prefers speed. Justice, on the other hand, prefers patience. Tell me something, I said, glancing at the file in front of me. Do you believe your position on the city council exempts you from the same rules as every other driver? Her chin lifted slightly. I believe context matters. My job requires mobility. The city benefits when I'm efficient. I repeated softly. That's an interesting word for it. I flipped the page. I've reviewed your driving history. It seems every citation in the last 3 years has either been dismissed or marked, resolved through administrative discretion. Can you explain that? Her eyes darted, just for a moment, before she steadied herself. My duties often involve city operations. Mistakes happen, but the administration handles them internally. Internally, I echoed. The meaning outside the court's process. Silence. She didn't need to answer. Her expression said enough. Behind her, I could see a few heads turning. The citizens who had been waiting patiently for hours, single mothers, construction workers, retirees, were now leaning forward, watching. They knew what was unfolding. It wasn't just a case. It was a mirror being lifted before them. I tapped my pen lightly against the bench. Miss Grant, do you understand what that looks like to the people sitting behind you? She hesitated. I understand perception can be complicated. I said, leaning forward. Perception is what keeps this room together. The people sitting here obey the law because they believe it's the same for everyone. The moment they stop believing that, order collapses. She didn't reply. She stood there, her hands folded, her eyes trained somewhere above my head. That's when my clerk quietly slipped me a note, a small folded sheet of paper. I opened it. It read, "The mayor's office is on line 1. Urgent." I set the note down without looking at it again. "Solmes, your father's office is eager to help you today." She exhaled, a quiet, almost relieved breath. "Then we can end this, can't we?" I shook my head. "No, Miss Grant. We're just getting started." A flicker of frustration crossed her face. Judge Caprio, with respect, my father is the elected mayor of this city. He has authority. Authority, I interrupted, is not ownership. Authority is responsibility, and the more you have, the more humbly you should carry it. That stopped her. Just for a second, her confidence faltered. I leaned back. Tell me, how many times have you used that authority to correct your own record instead of confronting your own mistakes? Her lips parted, but no sound came. I could see her mind searching for the right answer. The diplomatic one. The kind of answer that worked in city meetings and interviews. But this wasn't a press conference, I continued quietly. Your father governs from an office of trust. Every privilege you've inherited is built on that trust. Well, what happens when that trust starts to decay? Not because of crime, but because of convenience. She didn't respond. But I saw it. A subtle shift in her eyes, a trace of something almost human. Doubt. Then I said something I hadn't planned to say. Do you know why I delayed your case yesterday? She shook her head. Because I wanted to see what would happen next. I wanted to see whether the law would be respected or rewritten for your comfort. And this morning I got my answer. I held up the same file. Your citation was flagged overnight. Someone from city administration tried to adjust the record, clear it without a hearing. Her eyes widened slightly. The confidence vanished, replaced by surprise, maybe even fear. That's a serious allegation, she whispered. It's not an allegation, I said. It's a fact. But I'm not asking what your father did. I'm asking what you'll do now. For the first time since she entered my courtroom, Olivia Grant had no script to follow. The silence was heavy. The crowd behind her was silent too. No judgment, just a shared awareness that something important was happening. Miss Grant, I said finally, my voice low but firm, you are not on trial for being the mayor's daughter. You are standing here because you forgot that your name doesn't sit above the law. The privilege you were born into is not a shield. It's a test. When most people never pass. She blinked, eyes glistening, not with tears yet, but with the sting of recognition. I glanced toward the clerk. We'll reconvene tomorrow. I want to review this matter in full. Then turning back to her, and I want you to come back not as a representative, not as an heir, but as yourself. Leave the office behind. For the first time, she nodded without words. As she turned to leave, I could see something change in her walk. Her posture, still upright, carried something new, maybe discomfort, maybe realization. Power, when challenged by principle, doesn't always break. Sometimes it begins to listen. As I watched her disappear through the courtroom doors, I found myself thinking, if truth could reach even one person born in power, maybe justice still stood a chance. The next day, the courtroom was fuller than usual. News travels fast in a city like Providence, especially when the mayor's daughter is facing a judge known for compassion, not politics. Every seat was taken. Cameras weren't allowed, but you could feel their invisible presence anyway. Whispers carried through the air, soft ripples of speculation that seemed to quiet only when I entered the room. But Olivia Grant wasn't late this time. She was already there, and she was different. Gone was the polished suit and the air of command. She wore something simpler, a plain gray dress, her hair tied back. No makeup, no entourage, no city aide waiting by her side. Just her, standing alone before the bench. It was the first honest thing I'd seen her do. Good morning, Miss Grant, I said as I took my seat. Good morning, Your Honor, she replied, her voice steady though softer than before. Yesterday we spoke about privilege, about how power can shield or distort truth. Today I'd like to talk about accountability. She nodded, waiting. Your father's office reached out again this morning, I continued. They've requested your record be expunged, citing public image and political stability. Her eyes flickered downward. I could see the shame in that single involuntary movement. I refused. I said, because justice cannot be adjusted for comfort. For the first time, her eyes met mine directly, and this time I saw something there that wasn't pride or resistance. It was clarity, a painful one. Thank you, Your Honor, she said quietly. Those three words, unexpected, honest, carried more humility than any argument she could have made. I leaned back slightly. Miss Grant, you've lived in privilege your entire life. Tell me something. When was the last time you were told no and it actually meant something? She hesitated. Say, I don't know, Your Honor. That's exactly what worries me, I said. Because when no stops existing, so does accountability. When accountability disappears, privilege becomes poison. The courtroom was silent. Yesterday you said your efficiency benefits the city. But tell me, if the people waiting here today saw your fines erased while theirs were paid in sweat and sacrifice, would that make the city more efficient or more divided? Her eyes began to glisten, though she blinked back the tears with quiet restraint. You're right, she said. It would divide. I didn't think about it that way. She paused, searching for the right words. I thought it was how things were done, how the system worked. I nodded slowly. That's the illusion of privilege. It makes injustice feel normal, even rational. Her shoulders dropped. For the first time, she wasn't defending herself. She was listening. I stood, taking a few steps forward, closing the space between us. But do you know what I've seen from this bench, Miss Grant? I've seen mothers who worked 3 jobs still paying tickets they couldn't afford. She swallowed hard. The words hit their mark. A privilege, I said softly, isn't evil by itself. It's what you do with it that defines you. You can use it to insulate yourself, or you can use it to open doors for others. She finally spoke, her voice trembling slightly. What would you have me do, Your Honor? I looked at her, not as a judge now, but as a man who had seen far too many wasted chances at redemption. Tell the truth, I said, publicly, not to save your image, but to save your integrity. Admit that you're wrong, not just for this ticket, but for every time you benefited from a system others suffer under, and then use your position to change it. She blinked, taken aback. You want me to go public? Yes, I said. Nigel, because when power hides behind silence, it multiplies its damage. But when it speaks truth, it begins to heal. A long silence followed. You could have heard a pin drop. Finally, she nodded. I'll do it. I studied her carefully. Are you saying that because it's easy to say in this room or because you mean it? Her voice steadied. Because I mean it. Something shifted in the courtroom. The atmosphere, tense and uncertain, softened. The spectators, once skeptical, now watched her with a cautious respect. It wasn't redemption yet, but it was the first step toward it. Miss Grant, I said, the law requires me to issue a fine, but I'm also giving you an opportunity. You will pay this ticket like everyone else. But I want you to do something more. Spend a week volunteering at the Municipal Outreach Center, the same place where people come when they can't afford to pay their fines. Listen to their stories. Learn what justice looks like when you're standing on the other side of privilege. She nodded, eyes lowered. Good, I said, my tone softening. Justice isn't about punishment, Miss Grant. It's about perspective, and perspective, when earned, changes everything. When she turned to leave, she paused and looked back. Your Honor, she said quietly, yesterday, I thought this was just about a ticket. Today, I realize it's about who I've become. Thank you for making me see. I didn't respond right away. I just nodded, because sometimes silence carries more truth than any words could. As she walked out, I saw a woman stripped of her armor of entitlement, a person who, for the first time, seemed ready to face herself. And as the door closed behind her, I said quietly, mostly to myself, power is never truly dangerous until it stops recognizing its own reflection. For that moment, the courtroom was still. No applause, no murmurs, just a collective understanding that something meaningful had happened, something no amount of privilege could purchase. The next morning, the courthouse was quieter than before, but not empty. Word had spread that something remarkable had begun to unfold in Judge Caprio's courtroom. It wasn't just about the mayor's daughter anymore. It was about what her story represented. A city finally looking at the reflection it had been avoiding. When Judge Caprio entered, Olivia Grant was already seated at the defense table, hands folded, eyes forward. There was a new stillness about her. Not defiance, not fear, but readiness. She wasn't alone this time. Sitting in the second row was a young man about 19, his uniform shirt still creased from work. His presence didn't carry power. It carried something heavier. Truth. The clerk called the next witness, Ethan Ruiz. A few heads turned. The last name was familiar. Officer Ruiz had testified earlier, the man who'd spoken about the mayor's interference. This was his son. He rose, walked to the stand, and swore in with trembling fingers. Caprio studied him for a moment before speaking. Mr. Ruiz, you understand that this hearing concerns administrative interference in public matters? Yes, Your Honor, Ethan replied. His voice was quiet but steady. And you came here today of your own choice? Yes, sir. My father didn't want me to. Said it wasn't my fight. But it is. A murmur rippled through the room. Olivia turned slightly, unsure what was coming. Caprio nodded. Go on. Ethan took a breath. Last year, my father wrote a ticket for a car that blocked the emergency lane outside St. Matthew's Hospital. It was during a charity gala. That car belonged to Miss Grant. Olivia's eyes widened slightly, but she didn't speak. He told me about it that night. Ethan continued. He said he was tired of feeling like some people were untouchable. He was proud of doing the right thing. Caprio's gaze stayed fixed on the boy. And what happened after that? The next morning, Ethan said, a call came to his station. The ticket disappeared before it was ever filed. Father was reprimanded for overstepping his jurisdiction. That week, he stopped getting overtime shifts. He stopped smiling at dinner. The words hung heavy. Ethan's voice faltered, but he pressed on. That's when I realized rules don't protect people anymore. They protect positions. My dad told me not to get bitter, but it's hard not to when you see someone lose faith in what he spent his life serving. The courtroom was silent. Every syllable seemed to echo. Caprio leaned forward. And why testify now? Ethan hesitated, glancing briefly toward Olivia. Because when I heard Miss Grant spoke yesterday, when she admitted what she'd done, my father said maybe it was a sign that people can change. I wanted him to see I believe that too. A hush swept through the room. Olivia turned fully now, facing him. I didn't know, she said softly. I didn't know your father was the one. I never thought about what those calls meant to real people. Ethan shook his head gently. You weren't supposed to. That's how people like us disappear. Not by choice, but by design. Her eyes welled up. For the first time, the arrogance that had once defined her was gone completely. In its place was remorse, unpolished, raw, and real. Caprio broke the silence. Mr. Ruiz, your testimony will be entered into record. And let it be known, this court values your courage more than you can imagine. Ethan nodded, his voice breaking slightly. Thank you, Your Honor. I just want my father to believe the system can still work. Caprio smiled faintly. It can, son, but only when people like you remind it how. As Ethan stepped down, the courtroom didn't erupt or whisper. Erupt or whisper. Simply breathed, as if the city itself was exhaling after years of holding its breath. Olivia sat perfectly still. Her composure, once a mask of power, was now stripped bare by a boy's quiet truth. When the judge turned back to her, his voice was calm but resonant. Hey, Miss Grant, do you wish to respond? She stood slowly. Yes, Your Honor. She turned toward Ethan first. Your father was right to do what he did, and he was right to be tired. People like me made him that way. I can't undo what's been done, but I can make sure it doesn't happen again. Ethan looked uncertain, almost shy. Words won't be enough, he said quietly. I know, she replied. Then let my actions prove it. Judge Caprio's eyes softened, though his tone remained firm. On Miss Grant, what you've heard today, this is what justice looks like when it's lived, not spoken. It's not about politics or punishment. It's about people. She nodded, her voice steady but trembling at the edges. Then I'm ready to face whatever comes next. Caprio leaned back, letting the moment breathe. It will resume tomorrow, he said finally. And tomorrow, Miss Grant, will be the day power faces its mirror completely. He struck the gavel once, the sound echoing through the hall like a promise. Ethan left quietly, his father waiting in the back row, pride written in the lines of his weary face. Ace. Olivia lingered for a moment before leaving. The crowd parted silently for her this time, not out of deference but respect. Outside, the sky was overcast, the kind of gray that seems to hold its breath before a storm. Reporters swarmed, flashes lit up like distant lightning. But Olivia didn't hide her face. She walked past them, eyes forward, voice low when she finally spoke to the cameras. Oh, my father taught me that image is everything, she said. But I'm learning that truth is louder. And as she disappeared into the waiting car, the city of Providence, for the first time in a long while, began to whisper not about scandal, but about courage. The final day arrived like the quiet after a storm, the kind of morning where even the air feels cautious. By then, everyone in Providence knew the story. What began as a parking ticket had become a mirror for an entire city. Outside the courthouse, the streets were lined with cameras, protest signs, and faces both curious and weary. Inside, though, the atmosphere was hushed. The crowd wasn't here for spectacle anymore. They were here for resolution. When I took my seat that morning, I didn't see a defendant at the table itself. I saw a young woman sitting straighter than before, her hands folded neatly, her expression stripped of pretense. Gone were the heels, the sunglasses, the shield of entitlement. Olivia Grant looked like someone who had finally stopped performing. I began softly because justice, when it reaches the truth, doesn't need to shout. Miss Grant, I said, we've been through several hearings, and in that time, this court has heard testimonies not only about violations of traffic law, but of public trust. Before I deliver my decision, is there anything you'd like to say? She stood, her voice low but steady. When I first walked into this courtroom, she began, I thought it was just another place where names decided outcomes. I thought I could handle it like a meeting. Smile, negotiate, walk away. But this court didn't let me walk away. It made me look at myself. She took a slow breath. My father taught me how to lead people, but he never taught me how to follow rules because he didn't think we had to. I used to think that made us special, but all it made me was blind. Every favor, every phone call, every quiet dismissal, it made me smaller, not stronger. The room was still. The reporters had their pens down. Even the camera seemed hesitant to interrupt. I've spent years, she continued, of believing the world owed me forgiveness. But now I see. I never even asked for it. Her eyes lifted to mine. So I'm asking now, not for leniency, for the chance to make something right. For a moment I didn't speak. I wanted her words to live in the silence they deserved. Then I said, Miss Grant, what you've expressed here is a weakness. It's the beginning of accountability. But the road doesn't end with confession. It begins there. I removed my glasses and folded my hands. This court will not send you to imprisonment. That would satisfy headlines, not justice. Instead, you will serve 200 hours of community service with the city's traffic safety initiative. You'll meet the people whose lives were altered by negligence, by the kind of carelessness you once dismissed as harmless. You will hear their stories, you will tell yours. Her lips parted slightly, eyes welling. Please, Your Honor. And I added, a copy of this court's findings will be forwarded to the Ethics Commission for review of your father's office. The law, too, must face itself. Gasps rippled through the courtroom. Olivia didn't protest. She only nodded, not in defeat, but in understanding. You see, Miss Grant, I said, the justice isn't a punishment. It's a mirror. And sometimes the hardest part of facing it is realizing how much of ourselves we've ignored. And when I struck the gavel, the sound didn't echo like an ending. It sounded like a beginning. Olivia didn't rush to leave. She turned toward the crowd, scanning faces she'd never truly seen before. Citizens, officers, clerks, the same people she once passed without acknowledgement. Then her eyes landed on a woman sitting quietly in the back row. The woman was holding a photograph of a teenage boy, her son, killed in a speeding accident. The two of them locked eyes. Olivia hesitated, then stepped forward, her voice barely audible. I'm sorry, she whispered. The woman didn't speak. She simply nodded, once as if to say that sorrow, when met with honesty, could finally rest. Outside the courthouse, the world waited. Reporters swarmed as Olivia exited under the law. But there was no arrogance in her step this time, no practiced smile. Someone shouted, Miss Grant, do you think justice was fair today? She paused for just a moment, her hair moving gently in the autumn wind. Justice, she said, her voice calm, isn't punishment. It's truth. And today, I finally faced mine. That single line traveled farther than any ruling I had ever delivered. By nightfall, millions had watched it online. But what they didn't see was what came next, the part that mattered most. A week later, away from the cameras, Olivia was seen visiting the rehabilitation center for young crash victims. She helped a boy adjust his prosthetic leg, listening to him describe his dream of becoming a police officer. There were no microphones, no speeches, only two people sharing a quiet moment that neither of them would ever forget. That's where redemption begins. Not in the glare of public forgiveness, but in the quiet spaces where accountability becomes compassion. I've presided over thousands of cases, petty disputes, parking tickets, lost tempers, lost lives. But every so often, one reminds you why the bench isn't just a seat of authority, it's a seat of reflection. Olivia Grant came into this courtroom wearing the armor of privilege and a bridge. She left wearing the weight of responsibility. And somewhere in that transformation, this city, maybe even this country, remembered what justice really looks like when it stands without fear. Because justice isn't a weapon, it's a mirror. And the bravest thing a person can ever do is look into it and still choose to change.